brother! He's my brother!
Why are you calling me brother? Who the hell are you?
Fire Emblem Fates starts with a genuinely interesting choice. You're asked to choose between banging your cute tomboy sister
I spent my whole life looking for you.
or your sexy horny sister with big boobies. And brother, let me just say, it is not a very difficult decision. Now I figured it best to address the elephant in the room first and foremost. Chances are, if you even just heard of Fates, you've heard it's the one with the, and I'm not here to deny that. It's patently true. But what I'm trying to say is, you can't help who you fall in love with. And I love Fates. I've searched my heart and I know it to be true. To me, it is the pinnacle of what this series can be. But this is a sentiment I find far too uncommon. Because I see what you people say. Things so Fates phobic it makes my skin crawl. It's always, Fates? You mean the one with the bad story and the Yikes! As if that wholly disqualifies it from discussion. Forgive them, Father. They know not what they say. They know not the beauty that is Fates. They know not that Fire Emblem Fates is worth it.
Why the ocean's gray
But that's what Daddy's here for, innit? Before I even begin, I'm not sure how much detail I can get into, but let's just say that maybe the footage you see looks really good, and maybe I am extremely grateful to the people who made that happen. Maybe. Or maybe not. Moving on. First, to understand why Fates is how it is, it seems prudent to start at Awakening. Yeah, I know. But get this. Fire Emblem Awakening saved the series. It's been said ad nauseum, but it's easy to see why. You add waifus, and suddenly, it's a whole different ballgame. But Fates takes it a little further. Case in point. If I were to ask people who their favorite character pre-Awakening was, a lot of them would probably say Ike. That makes sense. I mean, he is the main character after all. He's heroic, fights for his friends, and doesn't afraid of anything. If I were to ask the same question post-Awakening, I know a lot of perverts would say Camilla for two very big reasons. And I couldn't blame them. Now whether this change is really a good or bad thing, I guess depends on how horny you are. but there's no denying that the series definitely took a swerve post-Awakening. A swerve towards the darker side of anime. And basically, it's all Awakening's fault, whether it's in and Fates. I mean, people sure seem to love those waifus. But what if they weren't just some random strangers? What if they were something more familiar? Something more perverse? Stop! Did Fates take it too far? Debatable. The point is, Fates swerved so hard into anime, they literally just included Japan. I mean, it's literally just Japan. Looking at it from a top-down perspective, this is probably the aspect that stands out the most. You know what's crazy? The fact that it took 14 games to have actual samurai in Fire Emblem. Now, of course, there have always been samurai-adjacent characters, but what were they called? Myrmidon, the legally distinct samurai. Look, a Myrmidon! Anyway, all this to say, I was really glad to see Fates make a drastic change to the aesthetic with feudal Japanese influences, at least for half the setting. I hope it's not too controversial to say, but Fire Emblem has always been a pretty generic medieval fantasy setting. You know, there's knights, magic dragons, the works. But now you throw in Japanese magic, Japanese knights? Now we're cooking. I mean, granted, feudal Japan was a pretty safe pick. No one on Earth is going to argue samurai aren't cool, because they are. I would have loved to see them go all in on this new aesthetic, though, as its execution in Fates is remarkable. Everything from the looks to the sounds of Hoshido feel like they're treated with such reverence. I guess makes sense. It'd be one thing if it were just surface level inclusions like samurai and ninja, but Fates draws a bit deeper from the well of culture. You have some pretty out there picks, like the magic scroll wielding Onmyoji, who shoots animal spirits at people, and the Mechanist, who utilizes traditional Japanese katakuri puppets. It makes me wish they took risks with the aesthetic more often. As for the other half of the setting, well, Nor has designs more familiar to the series, like the classic horse guy, and of course the armored horse guy. But it also has some unique designs, like the sexy battle maid, and the zombie wyvern riding malignite. Not to say that the designs of Nor are bad, but in general, you could tell me a Norian character in any game in the series, and I'd believe you. But you show me a Hoshiden though? With disgust, I tell you. There's no mistaking a Hoshiden. So, imagine my surprise one day as I'm sitting there cranking it to Camilla hentai, as per the usual, when the Engage trailer drops. I mean, I literally stopped mid-stroke and watched, mouth agape. My prayers had been answered. Just look at these characters. And then they go,
Emblem, engage!
And turn into sci-fi amalgamations. And I thought Fates was bold. But I think even to this extreme, it still works. Like, Engage is still identifiable as a Fire Emblem game because so much of the series' identity is tied to the gameplay. Turn-based strategy, isometric map, the stats, random level ups, the simple combat system, move and fight. It could even have, off the top of my head, giant horse mechs with guns, which are cool by the way, and you would still know it's Fire Emblem from how it plays. Doesn't always have to be that drastic, certainly Fates isn't, but change is good, and I feel Fates was the series' first real foray into a new setting. And how does it fare? Well, one of the most common complaints levied against Fates is with his world building, or rather, its lack thereof. Now, I'm not going to refute that, much like the it's patently true. At least, it's true in the traditional sense. There isn't much written lore or history of the two kingdoms, but I never really saw that as being too crucial to its world. The world of Fates is predicated on a very simple concept: feudal Japan versus medieval Europe, chivalry versus Bushido, knights versus samurai. Your preconceived notions of these concepts already do the heavy lifting in establishing Fates' world. Like, what is Hoshido? Japan. Got it. Therefore, I think the execution of how these kingdoms were presented was the most important part to get right. And boy, do they. Everything about the presentation nails that core concept. The unique classes, the distinct architecture between the two sides, their differing weapons and magics, which aren't just for show, but blend perfectly into their gameplay roles and better inform of each nation's culture. Hoshida and Shuriken are strictly better than Nori and knives. It makes perfect sense. The brutality of Nor is reflected in their more powerful axes compared to Hoshidan clubs. Also, just look at the characters. You have names like Xander, Benny, Arthur, versus Ryoma, Setsuna, Saizo. You have the blonde hair, blue eyes characteristic of Norians versus not. And then of course you have Korin, an outsider to both kingdoms with a stupid ass name, but the way that concept is conveyed visually is really smart, because you know what a European dragon looks like, and you know what a Japanese dragon looks like. But then you have a Korinese dragon, and it's like, what the hell is that thing? Anyway, these are all good examples of world building, but perhaps in more subtle ways than having written lore. Even the soundtrack differs between both nations to really solidify their identities. Listen to how the same song differs between Hoshido and Nor. Now, it's important to note that many of the tracks in Fates aren't just tone-setting arrangements or random dubstep tracks. Bro, that song slaps though. But rather, many of the tracks in Fates are examples of how music might actually sound in Hoshido and Nor, using respective Japanese and European instruments. I think the soundtrack deserves a closer look. Above all else, I think the soundtrack best captures the earth-shattering drama the plot wishes it did. If nothing else, if you think everything I've said so far has been the ravings of a lunatic, let this be the main takeaway. This is one of the best executions of a soundtrack in a Fire Emblem game. Now, I realize it's not exactly the fairest statement considering how the first Fire Emblem is literally 34 years old. Like, if you're arguing that this is the best soundtrack in the series, you are clinically insane. But audio fidelity is only part of the equation. The much bigger part is its efficacy, how well the soundtrack is utilized. And in Fates, it's almost like it tells its own story. The ivories are not just tickled, my friend, but made passionate love to. You have these beautiful, pensive piano tracks all throughout. Then when things get serious, the piano's all like... And when things get really serious, like during the final chapters, the piano takes the sidelines to the violin. This track in particular makes those climactic chapters feel all the more epic. And the way the song seamlessly blended to more intense version in battles is a stroke of genius carried over from Awakening. But now I want to focus on something Fates does uniquely. Its main theme in Le Motif, that is, the theme that's repeated throughout most of the soundtrack, is literally a song in the game, sung by Azura.
You are the ocean's gray waves, destined to seek life beyond the shore, just out of reach.
choose my next words very carefully here. Fates is not the first Fire Emblem soundtrack of vocals, but I can confidently say that it is the first one with English vocals. It's amusing to think about, because if there was one game where it would be extremely fitting to have a song completely in Japanese in the English version, it would be Fates. Though having Azura's song be translated to English makes a lot of sense given how often it's used. I find out the way this theme culminates throughout the game, and especially in the final chapter, to be absolutely chilling.
You are the ocean's gray waves. You are the ocean's gray waves. You are the ocean's gray waves.
Azura! No, stop!
You are the ocean's gray waves, destined to seek life beyond the shore, just out of reach. You are the ocean's gray waves. Black wither cracks beneath its weight. Night breaks through the day, hard as a stone, lost in thoughts, all alone.
The only time you hear the full version of the song is as it plays over the credits, which serves as a beautiful yet bittersweet finale to the journey's end.
Yet the waters ever change, flowing like time. The path is yours to climb. In the white light, a hand reaches through. A double-edged blade cuts your heart in two. Waking dreams fade away. Embrace the brand new day.
Now, everything I've said so far has been my opinion, but what I'm about to say is objective fact. Fire Emblem Fates has the best UI of any Fire Emblem game. That is not hyperbole, that is true. You might be thinking, wow, is he really going to talk about the UI? He's grasping at straws. But consider this. For any strategy game, the UI is probably the most important element. Depending on the complexity of the game, it has to display as much information as clearly as possible. Fire Emblem is perfect for the dual monitor setup on the 3DS, with all relevant information literally at the tips of your fingers. It's to the point where playing any game not on the DS feels like it's lacking in that department. Even playing through Engage, I was like, bruh, where the hell's my second screen? You know, it's funny looking at the Fire Emblem DS games as they were figuring things out. There's a total of 5 Fire Emblem games spanning the DS and 3DS, and the first 2, Fire Emblem Shadow Dragon and Fire Emblem New Mystery of the Emblem, Heroes of Light and Shadow, make possibly the single dumbest UI decision. If you don't see what I'm talking about, why the hell would they put all the information on the top screen? You know, the screen with no haptics? But sure, the games on the DS have good UI simply because of the hardware, and that's not something that can be helped, right? Wrong! There's one small thing in particular of Fates' UI that I think is the single most brilliant innovation to ever grace Fire Emblem, and it has nothing to do with 2 screens. Take a look. Do you see it? That's right! It's the weapon colors. The colors represent the weapon triangle. Red beats green, green beats blue, and blue beats red. Not only do the colors indicate the weapon's type, they also indicate what the weapon is strong against, with the corresponding color at the bottom of the icon. This design was especially smart given the fact that magic bows and shurikens now have a place in the weapon triangle as well. With the traditional weapon triangle, you might be able to intuit that lance beats sword, sword beats axe, and axe beats lance. I mean, realistically, if history is anything to go on, the pointy stick was better than like everything, but whatever. You might not be able to intuitively figure out though that bow beats shuriken, shuriken beats magic, and magic beats bow, mainly because it doesn't make any sense. But that's where the colors come in for clarification. I'm surprised it took this long for something that seems like a no-brainer to be introduced, and appalled that it's not in every game post-Fates. Come to think of it, the only game I can think of that copied this was... Oh no.
Guess what? That's what.
Now it wouldn't be nuanced if I didn't cover one more aspect of the UI. As I've mentioned, maybe, or maybe not, the footage you're seeing looks really good. Maybe you might remember the UI looking like this, where maybe weapons of the same type did not have unique icons. If I maybe wanted to give a reason for this, I might say, there are 288 weapons including staffs and enemy-only weapons in Fates. By far the most of any game. Except that one. A lot of these are weird jokey weapons, but the even weirder part is that many of them do have unique 3D models, which seems like it might be more difficult to implement than icons. I don't know what Three Houses' excuse is though. Before I get deeper into talking about Fates, I should clarify something. To state something everyone knows, but for posterity's sake, Fire Emblem Fates isn't one game, it's 3. Birthright, Revelation, and Conquest. You see, Birthright was made to appeal to casual waifu enjoyers, while Conquest is made to appeal to hardcore waifu enjoyers. Revelation was made to appeal to no one. So, to clarify, when I say Fates is the best Fire Emblem game, what I actually mean is the game within the Fire Emblem series, within the anthology known as Fates, named Fire Emblem Fates Conquest. For the most part, I'm just going to pretend like those other 2 versions don't exist when I refer to Fates. The reason why I think Conquest is the best version is because, in short, it's not a baby game. Of course, no offense to the baby game community. There's no grinding, limited resources, and much more difficult levels compared to the other versions. Conquest on Lunatic difficulty, I think, is the perfect challenge. Not excessive like a lot of the older games can be, but definitely still for big kids, which I think is very important as it gives a good reason to want to engage with all the gameplay mechanics. And this is where Fate shines, where it blows everyone else out of the water. Let's start with the very first thing you do in Fates. create a Korin. You can choose between male or female Korin. This determines whether you'll be banging your brothers or sisters. Like Awakening, you can choose how your avatar will look and what class they'll be. Actually, exactly like Awakening, because it's almost identical, except with Fates classes. I think Fates has the edge, though, when it comes to this aspect. In Fates, the units of Birthright and Conquest are for the most part restricted to the classes of their nations, so you're not going to get any Shrine Maidens in Conquest, for example. Korin can be any class, giving them access to skills and classes that would otherwise be unobtainable. This makes creating a Korin so much more interesting than it otherwise would be, with all the added considerations that come along with it. Being able to create your own unique character in a Fire Emblem game just adds so much to the experience, at very little cost, and encourages repeat playthroughs. Especially with the newer games, there's so many classes and skills to experiment with that having exactly one unit you could do whatever you want with seems like a great value addition for little downside. Look, I'm not saying every Fire Emblem game needs to have a character creator, but yeah, they do though. I think the amount of fun to be had largely outweighs the power level concern, plus it's up to the player whether or not the unit is any good. I mean, you can make an intentionally bad unit, or another horse guy, and not engage with the character creator at all, but having the choice to do so or not will always be the better option. There is something to be said, though, about how having a created character could damage the narrative, and maybe, possibly when they're the main character, and definitely when they're as stupid and ugly as Korin. You see, Korin is just a pretty generically boring goody two-shoes who everyone still inexplicably wants to bang. Wait a second. I think I know why. A pessimistic view as to why this is the way it is because, well, Korin is you. You created Korin. Korin was made in your image. Korin is you, and you are Korin. And you're not a bad guy, right? Don't you want to bang all these fictional characters? Doesn't Widow Baby want to be big and strong? This Widow Baby does. I am Korin, and I am proud. Following Korin creation, perhaps the next most notable addition is the lack of weapon durability, a feature present in every previous game of the series, and no, Gaiden doesn't count. This is a big one, so prepare yourself. Get this. Fates innovated on the usual weapon durability system. In lieu of the norm where number go down, Fates instead opts to give each weapon modifiers, with higher tier weapons having more severe downsides associated with them. For example, silver weapons have the highest attack, but they also stack temporary debuffs to your unit's offensive stats on use. There's now inherent risk in using the best weapons repeatedly. This system serves exactly the same purpose as the conventional durability system, forcing players to use powerful weapons more sparingly, but it does so in a much more dynamic way. The effects of this system are vast and varied. First, it allows for actual builds. New weapons can potentially change how you use a unit forever, not just for however many uses a weapon has. And with all these newfound choices, wouldn't it be nice if you had exactly one unit you could do whatever you want with? Wait a second. Maybe you want a tanky mage Korin, a Tankorin if you will, who uses a life-stealing Nosferatu tome, or a critic Korin, who excels at getting critical hits with the killing edge. Regardless, these considerations are now possible thanks to the lack of durability.
I'm glad you stopped by.
Anytime, babe. Now, let's see. This change also drastically affects Fates' economy. Weapons are generally more expensive, making gold even more valuable. In a normal playthrough of Conquest where gold is limited, it's unlikely you can get every weapon you want. Purchases become much more meaningful compared to the usual decision-making of buying 10 iron swords or 11. I'm going to use this word a lot, but it streamlines the entire process of gearing up and makes for more interesting decisions. Not only that, but from a design perspective, I'm sure it's much easier to design encounters around knowing exactly what weapons the player can have without the fear of them breaking. But the emotional aspect might just be the most important part of this whole thing. When a weapon breaks, it feels bad. The player is sad. Sad music plays. It's sad. Instead of using this cool weapon, maybe you should have used this bronze sword instead. This is also a big factor. The choice paralysis. Why would I use my cool weapon when the bronze sword can also get the job done? My cool weapon is valuable. I should save it for when I really need it. Only to find that you never really needed to use the cool weapon. You struggled through every fight with just the bronze sword, conserving the cool one for a time that never came. Well, that's just as sad. Think of all the fun you could have had with the cool weapon had you known you should have just used it. This perfectly sums up why I think weapon durability is such a boring way to balance weapons, and I'm glad it seems like it's on the way out of Fire Emblem. But with what I just said, therein lies the issue. Balance. How do you balance weapons of varying strengths when there's no durability? What's stopping you from just using your best weapon all the time? How do you keep that layer of strategy that weapon durability does bring? Well, I covered how Fates tackled this, with higher tier weapons having more significant downsides, along with the scarcity of these weapons due to the economy, and I think this was a step in the right direction, but it's a system they're still clearly trying to figure out in the newer games. In Shadows of Valentia, each weapon had a specific skill a unit could learn by using it, which is honestly a pretty interesting way to tackle it. In Engage, they kind of didn't try anything new, and weapons are how they usually are, except without durability. The only thing stopping you from using your best weapons all the time is them being prohibitively expensive, and the usual weight system. Come to think of it, Gaiden actually... I'm not talking about Gaiden. Gaiden should be thankful anyone even remembers it exists. Now there could be merit to Engage's anything goes approach, but I love how Fates handles it, and it'd be cool to see them try Fates' method again with a few tweaks. Just because you can always use your best weapon doesn't mean that it's always the best weapon to use. You can attack with that brave bow all you want, but you'll be doing half damage the next time you attack. It's interesting. Another little detail comes in the form of how weapon upgrades are handled, as Fates uses a completely different system from the rest of the series. Previously, you could spend gold to increase the stats of a weapon: might, hit rate, crit chance, and weight. All these are self-explanatory, except for maybe weight. Look, I can't get into the whole weight system, all of its pros and cons, and whether or not it should have been in Fates and Awakening. If I had to guess why it's not in these games, maybe it's because it just would have been too much to keep track of with all the skills and pair-up changes. But then again, it's in Engage, where there's more to keep track of, so... I don't know. Anyway, the weapon forging. Yeah, I liked how it was. You could make up for a weapon's weakness or a character's weakness by giving them a weapon better suited for them, like decreasing the weight of a weapon because the weight system is inherently sexist and female units weigh much less than male units, meaning they're slowed down more by higher tier weapons. I mean, the very existence of slim weapons. Let's just say I would be insulted if someone gave me a slim sword for my tiny woman arms. It's literally worse than a bronze sword. With weapons now being permanent in Fates, it's easy to see why they would want a new upgrade system. And what they went with was... weird. Upon first entering your base, you're given a mine that produces only one type of gem out of 6, with each gem corresponding to a weapon type. To upgrade a weapon, a duplicate of that weapon is needed, as well as the corresponding gem type. The weird part, I think, is the randomness associated with this process. Say you get a mine that produces emeralds. Emeralds are used to upgrade bows. Niles is the only character that uses bows in his base class. It's apparent that this makes the emerald mine a pretty bad one to get. So, what should you do? Reset your save file until you get a good one? Maybe. You can convert those gems to other ones at a rate of 5 to 1, and then wager that gem in the arena, but it's a lot slower than simply having a mine that produces the gem you want. Again, weapon upgrading also feels like something they're trying to figure out in these newer games. Engage kinda fixes Fates' problems by having generic ingots that can be used on any type of weapon, but there's still a good amount of randomness in getting the materials through your dog slaves. Unlike Engage though, Fates requires that extra copy of the weapon as I mentioned, and I kinda like that more. It gives purpose to excess weapons you have lying around, rather than just being something to sell off. That Steel Lance parry comes with now takes on an extra strategic layer. Because let's be honest, no one's actually going to use parry. Brings us to waifus. I mean, it would hardly be a Fire Emblem video without this. I'll be quick, because out of the gate, we can already eliminate 4 potential waifus. Azura is straight up Corrin's cousin. She's the only person with true blood relation to Corrin. That's just a fact. There's nothing gray about it. And another thing. Yeah. And I'm thinking S tier. And while Camilla isn't technically related to Corin, I'm sorry, she's kind of a slut. And honestly, it makes me feel really uncomfortable with how much she wants to bang Corin. Like, it's like... Yeah. And I'm thinking S tier. That only leaves 10 waifus in contention. Oh, this is an easy one. Selena. Ugh. Sloppy seconds, anyone? Yeah, that's a D tier. Mozu. Yeah, I mean, I can't really say anything bad about her. She's basically perfect. Plus, she has the best critical quote in the entire game.
You smell like a ghost!
A tier, no doubt. Baruka. Cool bandana. B for bandana. Felicia and Flora. The human fleshlight sisters. Okay, look. Legally, I don't think I could place them any higher than C tier. And here's why. Corin is their employer. This brings up the whole issue of power imbalance and all that stuff. C tier. Look, I know I'm going to catch a lot of flack for this one. Effie, a crowd favorite, the muscle mommy tomboy. Look, I mean no disrespect. Do I want to be crushed between her thighs? Yes, absolutely. The thing about Effie, though, is that she's not even the best tomboy muscle mommy in her own game. Look at Rinka. It's gotta be a C. Alright, who's next? Perry. Oh boy, here we go. I know I was just talking trash about her 2 seconds ago.
Because let's be honest, no one's actually gonna use Perry.
Mommy's here. You've been naughty. You need a spanking.
Hey, Vsauce, Michael here.
But that was actually a test to find the true believers. Hear me out. Number 1, she's got monster jugs. Number 2, that portrait where her makeup is running. For obvious reasons. Number 3, yes, she's a psychopath. And yes, she makes anyone who marries her look like an idiot, though I can sympathize. See reason number 1. But as far as Norians go, she's pretty in character. Just look at the 2 Norian generals we know of. Plus she enjoys killing people, and as weird as it is to say, Hoshidans are technically people. Thus, B tier. Maybe even higher, but definitely not lower. Next. Ooh, a truly worthy waifu indeed. Let's not beat around the bush here. Charlotte is S tier, easily. For one, she basically fights naked. But if you were thinking that this was just some random Coomer design choice, no! It fits her perfectly. Charlotte needs dick, and she'll stop at nothing to get it. They say the quickest way to a man's heart is through his stomach. If that's true, then the quickest way into his bank account is through his dick. A fact that Charlotte is clearly aware of.
Thanks for inviting me over. Now, where do you keep all the loot in here?
Easy S tier. Oh. Okay, look. Before moving on, I have a confession to make. Originally I put Niles here as a joke, like, haha, the one gay romance, he's not even a waifu. But then I thought about it. No one deserves to be on this list more than Niles. Reading through his support conversations, I had a weird, surreal moment. I found myself smiling, laughing even, and not at the dialogue, which is often the case, but with it. Also, he's kind of a bad boy. Roll the clip.
Niles, no offense to the Niles community, but you have quite a reputation of being inappropriate. I know what you mean. I can think of 100 ways to make someone cringe. Lie, cheat, steal. Just another Tuesday for little old Niles here. It wouldn't take much for me to make you feel better. Believe me, I know a lot of ways. You live a pathetic existence, you sibling-sucking sicko! I love you, my precious daughter. It's too late, Nina. The gross part of me is in you, too. And I'm, of course, meaning my penis. That's, of course, to clarify just what I mean there.
Oh, yes! I've had better.
Look, I'm not saying that Niles is literally me, but Niles is literally me. I wasn't sure about this, but I am now. Niles is my favorite character in the whole series. It's not close. He's going in Niles tier.
And yea, the sage doth spake. On this most holy of days, let there be waifus. And there was.
With all these great waifus to choose from, the question therein becomes, how do you get yourself one? And just like Awakening, the method remains the same. Sorta. The pair-up system returns, but with a few innovations. In Awakening, the pair-up system allowed you to essentially combine two units, with one acting as the lead and the other acting as a supporting unit safe from damage. The lead unit would get a number of stat boosts from the supporting unit based on what the wiki says they get. There's a bunch of variables affecting it that the game doesn't tell you, but generally the amount of stats a unit gets from a pair-up in Fates was massively decreased. Where it differs most, however, is with how combat is handled with paired-up units. Awakening's version was ridiculous. A paired-up unit had a chance for the backup unit to execute a free attack at full damage, and for the backup unit to completely negate an attack from the enemy. Both these occurrences were based on a percentage chance that increased based on the unit's support levels with each other. This meant that theoretically, a paired-up unit could negate every attack against them during the enemy phase while killing everything with multiple attacks. In short, paired-up units were unstoppable gods, both in terms of offense and defense, and there was absolutely no reason for a unit not to be paired up. With Fates' iteration of this system, the intention was to clearly take some power away from the pair-up. And they kind of succeeded. Paired-up units now can no longer get free attacks from the backup unit. They can still negate attacks, but this is no longer a percentage chance. It's a fixed rate with a bar that fills up when the paired-up unit attacks or is attacked, becoming full after 5 such actions. This small change has huge effects on how the game is played. Most apparent, you can now calculate when you'll negate an attack, making it more tactical, not random. Second, the bar. As mentioned, it fills with attacks and with getting attacked, but it starts to deplete after a turn if the unit has not been in combat. This highly encourages more active play, as you want to make use of your damage negation before it disappears. Even your most frail units can now be fully impervious to an attack, opening up all kinds of new opportunities. Additionally, separated units now actually have a purpose. A lone unit triggers a guaranteed follow-up attack from an adjacent ally, albeit at half damage this time. This makes positioning and sequencing all the more important, but the pair-up stance still remains absurd in a slightly different way this time. The reason being is that enemies can now also utilize every part of the pair-up system, unlike Awakening. This means that they come paired up, but they can also execute follow-up attacks with their allies adjacent to them. What I didn't mention was that these follow-up attacks are blocked completely by paired-up units. Since lone enemies are far more frequent than paired-up enemies, your own paired-up units are even more valuable to negate these attacks. Now, I don't think that the pair-up system being so strong is really a problem in either game. I think the new mechanic should be powerful, but I prefer Fates' take on it. I mean, pretty much across the board, all the changes made from Awakening are marked improvements, and as it stands in Fates, it's a pretty robust and interesting system. Paired-up units being more tanky, while solo units are more offensive, is a nice additional layer to incorporate into a strategy. Power level concerns aside, I like what the pair-up mechanic achieves in both games in a more general sense. If you really want to be reductive about it, the pair-up system meaningfully streamlines gameplay. Instead of having, let's say, 18 units, you now only have 9 to worry about. And with how many units you typically get in these games, it's really hard to care about all of them. Sure, you can deploy 18 units, but how many of those actually matter to you? How much time is wasted just moving around the trash who have no impact? A lot. Too much, maybe. Well, what if those units actually had a purpose as a support unit? That certainly simplifies things. Even if you don't use the supporting unit in combat, they still have a use, even if that use is just to be bred.
I love you more than anything.
Which brings me to my second point. Support conversations in newer games have been massively fleshed out, to the point of being fully voiced skits in 3 Houses and Engage.
Give me that potato!
No.
The pair-up system leads to units building support ranks very quickly, which leads to seeing more of these support conversations. These are, arguably, the most important narrative elements of these newer games, and that's clearly something the developers realize given how much they've been expanded upon.
Hand over the baked potato.
Respectfully, I decline.
In Fates, the gameplay systems in place naturally lead to and actively encourage getting new supports. The reward for a max level support is a tangible and valuable thing. More meat for the meat grinder. A child soldier to throw into the fray, as well as their accompanying side chapter. So the loop in these entries looks something like this. Build support ranks in combat, learn more about the characters, bow chicka bow wow, and so on with other units. The sheer amount of support dialogue in Fates is staggering, and it's impossible to see it all in a single playthrough given that units can only have one S-rank support, which encourages replete playthroughs with different shippings. And while you're at it, you might as well make a new core with a new build. Do you see how nicely it all fits together? Don't you want to marry and kiss all those live 2D waifus?
I love you so much.
You know, funny story as an aside, I had no idea what live 2D even was, or that these models were in fact live 2D models until this most recent playthrough of Fates. I was sitting there, cranking it to Camilla hentai and watching the credits, as one does, and noticed something peculiar.
You're so cute.
Oh, is that Studio Trigger? Studio Trigger. You know, the animation studio behind such series as Cyberpunk Edgerunners and Kill LA Kill. And now you're telling me they worked on one of my favorite games? What did they do? The cutscenes, perhaps? No, it says in the opening who did those. The art? No. So I went to Wikipedia, and what I found out changed me. Trigger did the live 2D illustrations, or the aforementioned pervert waifu scenes. But that's not the part that shocked me, that's par for the course for them. And to their credit, they do look really good. So, I clicked on the live 2D article and oh, it's the software VTubers use. Okay, that makes sense, it looks similar. But then I scrolled down a bit. The rise in popularity of live 2D was attributed to a PSP game known as Ore no Imoto ga Kona ni Kawaii Wake ga Nai Portable. A game for a series more commonly known as or Remo, a series in which the main character tries to bang his little sister. It was all the way down. Now believe me when I say, me, of all people who've seen like maybe 2 animes, is that how you say it? If you told me before Awakening release that playing Waifu Matchmaker with my units would be one of the most fun aspects of this series, I would have told you to kick rocks. But now that it's come and gone from the most recent entries, I'm telling you, playing Waifu Matchmaker with my units is one of the most fun aspects of this series, both for the narrative boinking element and the gameplay implications. Okay, but look, I'm not blind. Awakening and Fates are the only two games with the romantic pursuits with an S rank being marriage and what I assume is sexual intercourse. You don't really see anything, so I can only guess. Hence the whole Waifu Emblem moniker.
Big brother!
And I'll level with you. A few of the romantic relationships are, interesting, let's say. Betty, no!
You're going down, scumbag!
You don't scare me!
Die, you piece of shit!
Especially in Fates with the whole, Now, a relationship between a brother and sister would be one thing, but add on to that the fact that Corrin can S-rank their own niece or nephew and things get, interesting. Some of the S-rank supports don't even make sense. Or outright harm characterization, like with the existence of Perry. And the idea that Camilla would want to bang anyone else besides Corrin is just absurd. This is kind of the issue with having people fall in love in just 4 conversations. 1 second, they'll be talking about how they both like spaghetti or something. Then the next, they're confessing their undying love to each other. But for every 4 conversation like that, there was another one that I thought was actually pretty heartwarming or funny even. What's more, maybe it is appropriate for them to fall in love so quickly. I mean, it's easy to forget, but the characters in these games are in fact soldiers. Death could strike at any moment. Rushing into a relationship and securing their progeny makes sense from this perspective, no matter how forced or interesting it may be. But barring that, let's talk about the culminations of these romances. The fruits of thy loins. The children. Child unions remain one of the most fun carryovers from Awakening, but their inclusion in Fates is a bit different. Most notably, Fates doesn't even try to incorporate them into the plot at all. It's laughable how shoehorned in they are in just like one text box. Awakening's plot is built around the children, with them coming back from the future to take you back to the past, to play the shitty games that suck ass. Their goal is to save the world, which is about as simple as a motivation can get, but at least it's something, and it looks genius in comparison to whatever the hell Fates has going on. Gameplay wise though, Fates nails everything that was fun about child units in Awakening. You have 2 units bang it out, and the child inherits a skill from each parent. Reclassing options based on the parent's base classes, and growth rates based on what the wiki says. This makes child units in both games some of the most flexible and versatile units in the entire army, and likely some of the most powerful units in the entire world. The main difference though comes with how much more valuable these units are in Fates. With the infinite grinding available in Awakening, the child units are less of a commodity and more of just an item on a checklist. Recruiting them all is simple, you don't have to make many choices. In Fates it's very difficult to recruit all the children in a single playthrough, which makes units you didn't use originally even more enticing on repeat playthroughs. Given the limited resources in Conquest, the extra chapters to recruit the children are a much welcome boost that can be planned around. And the creativity does not stop with these maps. To name a few of the cooler ones, there's one that has you constantly hopping from ship to ship, which I'm pretty sure directly influences level and engage. There's one where you're chasing a BBW through a maze. And this weird one with the mechanic only seen on its map that has you setting up barricades to block enemy movement. It's really cool actually, and I guess the developers thought so too, as it's straight up a spell and engage. But perhaps my favorite, and this is a coincidence I swear, the one to recruit Niles' daughter. It has both armies frantically running around trying to steal as much loot as they can before the enemy gets away. If I gave the impression that these levels were at all free loot and experience, hell no! They have the potential to be some of the most challenging maps in the game. The further you get in the main story, the stronger the enemies become in the paralogs, and besides the fact that this inherently means that they can't be as finely tuned as the main story maps, it comes with another problem. Some of the maps just become impossible the later in the game they're attempted. Take this map for example. The map to recruit Benny's son Ignatius. Doesn't look too bad, right? You just have to make it to him before the enemies can sack the village he's guarding. But here's the issue if the map is attempted late into the game. Since you don't have control of Ignatius and the enemies become so strong, poor little Ignatius just gets decimated by the ninjas on turn 2, who will then destroy the village on turn 3. Meaning that this map now has an absurd 3-turn time limit. 2 turns if you want to recruit Ignatius since he has to be alive. Tackled early though, it's not nearly as bad. Ignatius can even hold his own for a little bit. Now, this is a very specific example with specific circumstances, and it's hard to think of any other way they could have adjusted these maps, but overall I'd say they're pretty worthy additions for everything they bring with them. In the narrative, all these levels exist within what Fates deems the Deep Realms. They're basically little pocket dimensions the parents throw their babies in to skirt their parental responsibilities. I bring this up not to point out how terrible all the parents in Fates are, but as a not so subtle segue to talk about Fates' hub area, housed in one of these multiversal dimensions. Look, much like time travel, if you think about it too much, things just completely fall apart. Fates' hub area is called My Castle. Haha, no silly, not my castle, it's literally called My Castle. It's where all the strategic decisions outside of battle that I've been talking about take place. It's their first real shot at a fully traversable hub area, and honestly, they got it right the first time. You choose what facilities to build and upgrade. You get plenty of the currency to do so, so there's never really any pressing decisions, but I do have to commend one aspect of this system. And this is a running theme of Fates, but it gives you a certain amount of freedom in how you approach things. The idea that you could do a whole playthrough without ever even building the weapon shop is insane, but you can do it. Or maybe you want to keep the weapon shop at level 1 and just buy bad weapons the whole way. Options like these are readily available within the game's mechanics, and I think the foresight in implementing such a system with the player's base was really smart. And then there's the online play options, which may or may not be gone by the time this video comes out. The only reason I mention this is because, again, it gives you more freedom in your decisions if you decide to use it. You can visit other people's My Castle to obtain items and skills that you otherwise couldn't. For example, early on in the game, the item shop only offers one reclassing item. You normally can't get more of these until later on when you upgrade the shop. By going online, though, you can get as much as your money can buy, paving the way for creative endeavors. Plus, there's this really nice feeling of community. It was nice seeing how people decorated their castles and what cute little things they would make out of their statues. Look at what this douchebag wrote.
Pickle Palace. Pickle Palace 2.
Look at this guy.
Beautiful. Cool. This guy's also an FE guy. Look at that. Whatever the hell that means.
Compared to the hub area in later games like, say, Three Houses, the comparison is stark. Now, I'm not going to trash Garrigmach Monastery conceptually. I think given Three Houses' increased emphasis on its characters, that having a place to fraternize with everyone was a good idea. In practice, though, yeah, I think it sucks. This is just a feeling, but I feel like I spent a lot more time in the monastery in Three Houses than I did actually playing through the levels. Running around playing grab ass.
Wow.
Having tea parties.
This was fun.
Choir practice.
Our voices are all over the place.
We must learn to work together in harmony.
Fishing. Why did they do this twice? The Somniel and Engage feels like a nice compromise between Fates and Three Houses, but even still, I'd take Fates' massively streamlined approach any day. For a totally unfair comparison, here's how long it takes to run the length of each hub area.
3, 2, 1.
Let's go!
Above all, though, the thing I love most about my castle is just how cozy it feels. And that's not just a feeling, I can quantify it. Aside from the obvious aesthetic things like the day-night cycle, the fact that you could change the music, layout, and the entire landscape. Aside from all this, there's one more aspect that I think contributes most to this coziness factor, and it's the insane amount of character interaction in the base. I'm not just talking about support conversations, no. There is unique dialogue for every single character for pretty much every single activity you can do in the base. To give you some idea what this means, there's unique dialogue for units just hanging out in the courtyard.
Look who's here!
Which changes depending on circumstances, like if they're married to Corin or if they're talking to someone else. If it's their birthday. If it's your birthday.
Happy birthday!
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday, old friend.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday! Yay!
If they're mining or gathering, with many of the food items having unique dialogue for each character gathering.
Well...
And all of that is just for characters who happen to be outside. There's also unique dialogue for characters on shop duty, differing between the weapon and item shop.
Looking for something?
With variation for when Corin enters the shop, buys or sells an item, buys or sells an item for the character on duty, and leaves.
See you around.
The same is true for the smithy,
To my fell storefront!
the lottery shop, with differing dialogues for winning each prize tier,
What's this?
the hot springs, which are pretty funny, the mess hall, with variations for if the character on duty cooked a good meal or bad meal, and if they're the ones eating a good or bad meal.
Well, here goes nothing.
Whoa, whoa, whoa!
Well, this is awful.
The arena, and whether or not the character wins or loses.
I'm too fragile for this.
Taste!
Yay, you did it!
And I know I'm missing a bunch of other cases, like I didn't even mention all the perverted stuff you can do in Corin's bedroom, and how it changes when they're married, but suffice it to say, there is a lot. My favorite, of course, being the blowjob minigame.
I'm at the go!
All these little details make my castle feel dynamic and truly alive. They make my castle feel like my home. It's funny because even though it has the most generic name imaginable, I really feel like my castle is the liveliest base even when compared to something like Garrick Mach.
Wow.
It's a small difference as well, but having random characters work at each of those facilities makes it feel like they're actually doing something, compared to Engage's Somnial, where most of the activities have a static character associated with them. There's one more thing I have to talk about in my castle. The prison. There's even unique dialogue for torturing a prisoner.
Endured the lash of the spanking.
Such a nuisance. Was that all?
On my shoulder!
Seriously though, this is probably one of my favorite things added in Fates, and that's saying a lot given how much I've been sucking its dick. Hopefully you've seen by now why such fellatio is justified, but I digress. The prison simply allows you to capture enemy units and use them in your own army. The repercussions of this, though, are vast and varied. On higher difficulties especially, some of the enemies are absurd. There's this notorious pair of generals mid-game that have very high stats for this point in the game, and the skill Warding Blow, which generals don't even learn. It's a Falcon Knight skill. This makes them extremely difficult to kill. The fact that you can capture them completely changes the perspective, and has you looking at enemies through a different lens at all times. Yes, they're giving me a hard time, but imagine how much of a hard time they'll give my enemies. This enemy buffs his homies every turn, but what if he was buffing my homies? It's crazy how much depth this one little mechanic contributes. Add on to this the fact that you can capture some boss enemies and the possibilities become even greater. Remember that BBW I mentioned? Yeah, she's more than just a pretty face. She's a potential ally with her own unique growth rates. A capturable enemy that can only be obtained through Kaze's paralog to get his daughter. Again, do you see how nicely everything ties together here? How varied this makes things? This isn't the only nuance with taking prisoners though. You could argue that Fates' system of capturing enemies is similar to Thracia's, and I'm sure that's where the developers of Fates got their inspiration from. Not only is it similar in concept, but a little bit in execution too. In Thracia, capturing a unit was solely just for stealing the contents of their inventory. Any unit could attempt to capture another that weighed less than them by making an attack with reduced stats. This system also had you constantly checking the enemies, but this time for any good loot they had. But like 90% of the things in those old games, it had its quirks. Since any unit could attempt to capture and the reward was items, it felt wrong to not constantly be trying to capture enemies to steal their stuff. Although entirely different in function, Fates' system streamlines the process of capturing enemies in a few ways. For one, confirmed best waifu Niles is the only one that can attempt to capture units. This provides a whole host of new challenges, none greater than the fact that Niles is pretty weak. Unless you're lucky, his damage output is likely to be pretty low. Niles can hardly put a dent in those generals from before, meaning that if you want to capture them, you'll have to be creative in your approach. Additionally, you're not looking for quantity of prisoners, you're looking for quality above all else. Since you can only field so many units, capturing units who fulfill specific niches or have unique or hard to obtain skills is the goal. Or, if you're feeling particularly devilish, you can always capture fodder to use as a guilt-free sacrifice.
お願いします。死にたくない。
雅彦さん、私が妊娠したんだ。
Another familiar, yet drastically different change is the reclassing system in Fates. And much like the removal of weapon durability, this is a big one, so prepare yourself. I think the reclassing in Fates strikes a perfect balance between freedom and restrictiveness. On one end of the spectrum you have Engage, where one reclass can change any character into any class. Now, there's a whole host of problems with Engage's implementation, but I think it has the right idea at its core, that having choices is good. But when these choices are as readily available as they are in Engage, they're much less impactful. At that point, every unit may as well be a created character. And when everyone is that special, well, no one is really that special. On the other end of the spectrum, you have the way reclassing was in the older games, which is to say, there wasn't much. There was no sideways progression. There's only a linear upgrade path that may be branched into 2 or 3 directions. Now, there's nothing inherently wrong with this system, but I'd much prefer a system that promotes experimentation. Something sexy. Something Fates. When it comes to reclassing, Fates is an anomaly. Awakening doesn't even come close to how variable and interesting Fates reclassing is. In Fates, if you want a unit to be a specific class, you have to work for it. The first and most apparent way to reclass is by using a heart seal, which changes a unit into another class based on their personality. If that doesn't sound specific enough, that's because it's not. That's literally the in-game description. It is fun though, to try and justify why characters have their secondary classes. Like, for the longest time, I was baffled as to why Effie could heart seal to a troubadour. But then I had a Fire Emblem Fates revelation. It's because Elise is her best friend. Heart seals alone only account for a few classes per unit, but they can also inherit classes from their spouse or best friend. The friendship seal is especially notable, as you really have to go out of your way to achieve an A-rank support between units that can't even bang. To give you a better idea, let's say, for example, and this would never happen with me, but let's just say, for some godforsaken reason, you really wanted to reclass Xander into a disgusting ninja. Using a heart seal on Xander reveals that he can only reclass into the Wyvern Rider line of classes, ruling out this method. Well, how about a partner seal to inherit it from his waifu? I mean, it's a good idea to pair him up with a breedable partner anyway. Except, there are no female ninjas in Conquest, so that's not gonna work either. In fact, you only get one ninja in the entirety of Conquest, Kaze. So, you would need to build support between Xander and Kaze all the way to A rank, sacrificing time they could be spending with their waifus. Choose Kaze as Xander's A+ support rank, of which they can only have one each, then use a friendship seal to reclass Xander into a ninja.
For the glory of Nor!
Not to mention the fact that Xander wouldn't even be proficient with Shuriken, meaning that he's starting at bronze and working his way up. Is this whole process practical? Maybe. Would you want to do this? Now that is a good question. There are some very real incentives. Using our nice example here, besides affecting the weapons he can use, reclassing Xander into a ninja gives him ninja growth rates for as long as he remains a ninja. Ninjas have a high speed growth rate, and Xander does not, meaning that Ninja Xander would naturally offset one of his weaknesses as he levels up. There's also the fact that skills can be inherited from classes you switch into by leveling up as that class, which is the most interesting part when it comes to building a character to your liking. Not even mentioning how children inheriting skills factors into the whole thing. But what really pushes the whole system over the top is how Corrin fits into the whole equation. No one can get an A+ support rank with Corrin, meaning that same-sex units can't inherit Corrin's classes, but if Corrin gets an A rank with a same-sex unit, they can switch into that character's base class. This gives Corrin the widest possible access to classes provided that they reach A ranks with multiple characters, which would take some effort. On top of that, Corrin can give any unit any class through marriage, in which their spouse can inherit Corrin's secondary class through a marriage seal. Like say, I wanted to make Felicia a blacksmith. Since there are no Oni savages in Conquest, of which blacksmith is the promotion of, the only way this is possible is through picking Oni savage as Corrin's secondary class all the way back in character creation, getting an S rank with Felicia, then reclassing her with a marriage seal. Suffice it to say, the possibilities are nearly endless. Not even mentioning again that once you beat the game, you can save your unit builds and have that same character learn those skills in a new playthrough, making for some insane hijinks. But all this would be meaningless without talking about skills, the main draw. Awakening set a new precedent with skills that Fates drew and iterated upon. From Awakening onward, each unit starts with their own personal skill.
Hey! Guess who, douchebag? Me again. You literally just showed both games. Personal skills were introduced in Fates. Sigh, yet another Fates W. Also, you stink. Dumb bitch.
It's a simple addition, but one that's extremely flavorful given that each unit's skills pertain to some aspect of their personality. It also works as an effective way to give each unit a unique identity, which was very much needed given that each game adds like 1,000 new characters. Units in Awakening could have up to 5 skills, not including their personal skill, and the same is true for Fates. Of course, Fates has all that wonderful class flip-flopping stuff, but I can see why some might be turned off by its skill system, at least initially, because there is a lot to learn, owing to the fact that there are a lot of skills. Aside from the individual skills of each character, each class has 2 skills associated with it, learned at certain level thresholds. This accounts for a whopping 109 skills, just from the classes and fates, not even counting character-specific skills. If you're wondering why that's not an even number when each class has 2 skills, I don't know either. Much like reclassing throughout the series, skills also lie on a spectrum, but this time, it's a matter of complexity. Skills were introduced in Genealogy of the Holy War, and they were surprisingly pretty simple. Well, at the very least, there are only 19 of them. Then, the complexity takes a nosedive in the GBA games, where skills are basically non-existent. Goes up a fair amount with the Tellius games, and then, for the most part, just keeps increasing from there. Engage arguably being the most complex with all the skills and abilities the emblem rings introduce. Yeah, unless you count that one. What is up, my little emblemites? Today we're going to be looking at this new Serene I opened, and well, let's get right into it. Okay, yeah. Alright guys, yeah, I'm not reading all that, but be sure to subscribe. I'd say Fate's skill system is about as complex as Awakening, maybe a bit more, and that's a good thing. Listen, I don't ever want to see a main series game as complex as Heroes. Of course, no offense to the Heroes community, but I generally think more complexity is a good thing for the series, as it often makes for more engaging gameplay. All of the brilliant gameplay mechanics I mentioned so far, though, weapon downsides, pair-ups, skills, reclassing, all of it, would be absolutely wasted if one other aspect wasn't up to par. The level design. Before I get into specifics, I want to talk about the level design in a more general sense. The aspect that by far stands out the most with Fates' level design is that most levels have a gimmick associated with them. Water that stops enemy movement. Wind that pushes units around. A cloning machine. They're as creative as they are numerous, except one minor caveat. They're not mere gimmicks. Juggling, that is a gimmick. Of course, no offense to the juggling community, but having expertly crafted maps with thoughtful, unique mechanics, that's inspired. So, forthwith, I will be referring to these instances as special mechanics. It seems to me that the general philosophy with having levels with all these special mechanics was to keep the player on their toes with unique and varied scenarios. And I respect the hell out of this decision, because they take some wild swings in Fates. That special mechanic I mentioned with the wind blowing units around, I happen to like that level, but I can easily see it being extremely polarizing. And that's a big reason why I think Fates has this spirit of innovation at its very core. They try a lot of new stuff. One thing is for certain, the levels have no problem standing out from each other as they're all so distinct. And that is something worth celebrating. At the most base level, you're still playing Fire Emblem, but with a little bit of a twist. If you love or hate a level's mechanic, it's there for only that level before they move on to something totally different. To me, this type of approach ensures that the experience never feels boring or samey, as you're dynamically changing your strategy each map. It fills me with such optimism, as if the levels could be anything, bounded only by their creativity. Like, here are some scenarios I thought of off the top of my head. A level with dragon veins that transform Corrin into Dragon Corrin. A level with chariots. I don't know, it'd work out somehow. A level where aliens abduct you and probe your ass. If that last one sounds too ridiculous, I mean, it's basically already in the game. The natural argument against having levels like this is that they feel too puzzly. In other words, to my understanding, Fates' levels are bad because they encourage following a rigid solution set up by the level's special mechanic, and they de-emphasize player ingenuity. Surely, After everything I've said so far, you see why this can't be the case. If it were true that the majority of levels were just strict puzzles, at the very least, they would be puzzles where player ingenuity is at the forefront, given how much variability is present in Fates' mechanics. Though, there is one very good example in Fates where this criticism is abjectly true, and I think it bears talking about just to see what a real puzzle is.
Die!
The final chapter of Conquest, entitled Endgame, is awful from head to suckable toes. It looks simple on the surface. It's basically a giant hallway, where you start at the top of the map and work your way down towards the final boss. The only problem is that is not possible. Listen, I am a gamer, but this is too much. The biggest issue is that they decided to give every unit that debuffs this skill, Inevitable End. This makes it so that debuffs stack infinitely, whereas normally a unit can only be debuffed from one source at a time. Coupled with maids who have the Enfeeble Staff, insane range, and infinite uses, along with ninjas who debuff on every hit, it's almost impossible to push through while all your units are getting their stats debuffed to 0. You know, that tanky unit you build up that's been good against every other ninja in the game. Wait, where did they go? Doesn't matter what class or skills you have, everyone is equally terrible when all their stats are 0. All but the most optimal or specialized units even have a chance at advancing, which entirely defeats the purpose of having units that are highly variable. Even then, it's still pretty much impossible. I didn't even mention the other special mechanic of this map, that has Takumi blasting energy waves every few turns. Or the fact that if you lose, which you will, you have to fully replay the previous map as well. Because honestly, compared to everything else going on in this map, those things hardly matter. So, why do I say this map is the most puzzle-like? Well, since playing normally is impossible, the only viable method to beat this map is by creating a complex, successive chain of teleports directly to Takumi and praying that the teleported unit gets lucky and kills him in one round. And I guarantee that's how this map plays out for everyone. They get frustrated playing the map for hours, dying, having to replay the previous map, and finally, Googling strats on how to beat it, definitely not speaking from personal experience. But if I was, I would say something like, having played Conquest a lot, I knew that by the end of the game, I needed a unit specifically just to kill Takumi. It was Ophelia this time. I forged her a lightning tome, and even named it the Takumi to Killer, confident that this would be the weapon to strike that bastard down. I reclassed her to a Master of Arms to get life and death, giving her a massive plus 10 damage boost. Paired with Malefic Aura, that's a plus 12 bonus to damage, just from skills. Since Elise is her mother, Ophelia's magic cap is the highest it could possibly be, second only by 1 point to a magic boon Corrin mother. After using every stat boosting item available, and upgrading her statue in my castle, Ophelia's magic stat caps out at a monstrous 41. Add plus 2 from a magic tonic, plus 6 from an A rank support with her father Odin, reclassed to a sorcerer, and plus 4 from rally magic, and when all is said and done, her magic is at 53. And adding that plus 12 bonus from skills, plus 3 attack from the Takumi to Killer, plus 3 attack from having an S rank mastery in tomes, and plus 2 attack from the weapon triangle advantage tomes have over bows, and she's attacking for 73 damage. Nothing is surviving this. Not even mentioning that lightning attacks twice per hit, which is actually 4 times, since of course I made sure I was fast enough to double him, so it's actually 73 times 4. So here's what happened when I went for it.
Such are the whims of fate!
Luminary uppercut! Oh, yes! You'll rue the day.
Alright. I just got really unlucky that he activated Vengeance, or that he even hit me at all, really. I even have Bowbreaker to help avoid his attacks, but alright, no problem. I'll just try again. 24 times 4 is more than enough damage. He only has 75 health. I didn't even need that lucky 2% crit. Here's what happened on the next attempt.
The darkness whispers. Be well, friends!
Unleashing my fist. Witness my true power.
I didn't even do the math, to be honest. I was so sure he would die, I was absolutely dumbfounded. Let's go back for a second. Remember when I said I was attacking for 73 damage? All that math was correct. I didn't care what his resistance was, because 73 is such a damn big number. But let's take a deeper look. His resistance is 24. Not that scary. So that 73 becomes a 49. Okay, still not that bad at all. But he has a skill that halves all damage. So that 49 is halved and rounded down and is actually a 24. Do you know why I know all this? Because when I saw that he lived with 3 HP, I was livid! So I looked up exactly why I was doing that much damage. And you know the worst part? It actually would have worked the first time when I got that lucky crit and he hit on a 23% chance.
Root the day.
But you want to know the actual worst part? 73 damage was the absolute minimum threshold for him to survive. If it was 74 damage, it would have been fine. 74 minus 24 is 50. Divided by 2 is 25. Times 3 is 75. It was just so perfect that it had to be done on purpose. They knew that I, specifically, would be using Ophelia with Elise as her mother, a forged Takumi to kill her, life and death, malefic aura, A-rank sorcerer Orden support, a magic tonic, rally magic, S-rank tomes, weapon triangle advantage, so they gave Takumi exactly enough stats to survive. There's no other explanation, and I scoured everywhere for that +1 damage. It didn't exist. So, I switched to Corrin, who does 75% damage instead of half, but even then, I knew she wouldn't have enough damage, because I didn't specifically build her to kill Takumi. And I was right. After optimizing her stats as best as I could, she dealt 64 damage. A lot better than I thought, but still not enough. I figured that if she activated her skill Dragon Fang, I would probably have enough damage to win. Here's what happened.
Kill.
Takumi.
Distance now!
There are no words. I promise you, I did not plan this. And no, there's not some hidden mechanic where he lives at 1 HP. And trust me when I say, I optimized my damage as much as I could. So, I calculated. The only conceivable way I would be able to beat this would be if Corrin activated Dragon Fang on both her attacks, which came out to be about a 10% chance. So, after hours and hours of dying, replaying the previous level, only for a meager 10% chance at victory, I finally did it.
Takumi.
Evil shall not prevail!
I won't surrender!
No need to thank me!
For now!
Just kidding. It only took 2 attempts, but you have to understand how unlikely that was. All this to say, that is a puzzle. There is no other way to beat the level without doing that. I don't even care if you show me someone beating the level without doing that. Truly puzzling. Puzzling as to what the hell they were thinking. Even still, I can't bring myself to hate this level because of what it represents. It makes perfect sense both thematically and gameplay wise that the final level should be the ultimate challenge of the game. Imagine how anticlimactic it would be if you just steamrolled over the final boss. And it seems almost uncanny how Takumi survived. Almost like the developers knew exactly how much damage the player would be able to do. They had the right idea, but perhaps the wrong means. Aside from this most egregious example, other maps with prevalent special mechanics are designed with some smart considerations in mind to keep them in check, that prevent them from being strict puzzles. Namely, dragon veins. Except, if you're anything like me, you notice that was a turtle. Are they stupid? Dragon veins are single-use effects found in set areas, with a variety of effects depending on the map, but they all help in controlling the battlefield in some way. At their most powerful, they feel incredible. Take the dragon veins on Arthur's Paralog, for example. You gather enemies around it, then, in a small radius. Legitimately the closest I've been to orgasm playing any of these games. Very little compares to how satisfying this is. Generally speaking though, dragon veins interact with the level special mechanic, or are themselves the special mechanic. That wind level, the wind blows your units around, but you activate a dragon vein, and suddenly, the shoe is on the other foot. Scenarios like this are why I think dragon veins are so brilliant and necessary. You're not at the mercy of the mechanics, it's entirely up to you when, why, where, and how you use them all, if at all. Even the who matters. Royalty or children of royalty are the only units that can activate dragon veins. This adds an extra little wrinkle when it comes to positioning, and it's another good little bit of world building. It shows how powerful these characters are through gameplay, as the land literally bends to their will. If this were all that the levels in Fates had going for them, they'd be pretty good, but they commonly do one other thing that makes me feel like the designers really get it, that they understand what makes a map fun. Pressure. Almost all of the maps in Fates have some sort of time constraint, whether that be a hard turn limit, or the tried and true ransacking bandit. They even get creative with these. One level has a gold reward that goes down the longer you take, another a hard turn limit, but also a load of reinforcements that flank you from behind about halfway through. And of course, the infamous Prince Ryoma will wait patiently for his revenge, but only for 20 turns. Yes, if I had to quantify my anger, I would say 20 turns. That one's a bit of a stretch, admittedly. Time constraints like these are essential in forcing the player to make meaningful decisions. Rather than slowly creeping forward and being risk-averse, a time constraint adds urgency and pushes the player to take risks. Risk introduces danger, which leads to failure, but it also leads to great triumphs. Any game is at its best when you're engaging with all of its mechanics, and forcing you to take risks is a good way to bring this about. In Fates, this might look something like this. Having to place a unit in an unfavorable position where they'll have to take multiple attacks on the enemy phase. Who knows what'll happen? It seems more than likely that they'll just die, but maybe the enemy misses. Maybe a skill activates and saves them. Maybe they crit. Maybe dual guard fills up at the perfect time to block a lethal attack. Situations like these where everything comes together might be uncommon, but they're much more likely to occur with the introduction of risk, leading to those moments of tactical ecstasy.
You'll rue the day.
Here are a couple maps that I think best exemplify what I'm talking about here. Chapter 10. Now this is pretty much the map when it comes to Fates, and for good reason. It's pretty much a perfect map, and I don't say that lightly. I wouldn't joke about such things. To begin, it's got that tight 11 turn time limit. It feels perfectly paced, not a turn too long or short. You will get overwhelmed as the final turn approaches, leaving you desperately scrambling to prevent a single enemy from breaking through your defenses. Because God help this glorious kingdom of Nor if even a single one of those disgusting insects makes it in. It makes for so much tension in those crucial final turns. Although the goal is to simply defend this one area, the map is far from static, which is in contrast to what you might think defending an area would be. You are actively encouraged to push out, 1, to keep the enemy at bay, and 2, to get the sweet lootation scattered about. The way this map typically plays out is S-tier drama. The first thing you'll probably realize is that each corner of the map has enemies with different weapons, axes, lances, shurikens, and bows, allowing you to send the appropriate units to combat them. A few turns pass, and it quickly becomes apparent that the flyers coming down the center pose an enormous threat as well. These are likely to be a big problem for the player's armies at this point, as they typically only have one archer and no flyers. Ignore my footage. Certainly for me, it was at this point where I was on my hands and knees praying to the gods to send some kind of answer to this winged menace. Sure enough, like an amply bosomed angel from the heavens, Camilla appears on turn 3, giving you not 1, but 2 flyers, including Baruka. Oh, and Selena is there too, I guess. Things are looking pretty good. Camilla can dart around the map, busting the nuts of the flyers, and for a few turns, it's looking pretty manageable. Maybe you even consider going for Takumi himself to wipe that smug look off his face. And then, that little bitch does this. To his credit, at least Takumi waited 7 turns before committing his brazen act of eco-terrorism. Besides obliterating the local wildlife and marooning his own ships, this reckless maneuver also allows all units to walk where there was previously water, as if they were saying, yeah, that was the easy part. Now get ready. Previously, you could hold the enemies off in these nice little choke points, but now they're spilling in from everywhere like the little ants they are. The tension builds as Takumi's retainers also enter the fray, until it climaxes at the aforementioned last turn, turn 11, where you find out if your efforts were for naught.
Fuck!
This is the map I think of when I think of Fates, and this is the character. Not only is it an exceptional defense map, it's also just a very well executed map in general, with some great twists. I'll tell you, the first time I saw Takumi drain that water was the first time I saw my bladder drain the piss directly into my pants. It's the first occurrence of an enemy using a dragon vein against you, and it is genuinely terrifying. To me, Chapter 10 is the perfect example of what an early game map should be, really stretching your limits before your units get crazy powerful and impossible for the designers to plan around. The next map is a really good example of a late game map. Chapter 21. The objective is simple. Get from the bottom of the mountain to the top with all your units. But even this simple objective has facets to it. Hate this map for some reason? Withdraw all your units except Corrin and a flyer and escape in like 2 turns. This is yet another thing I love about Fates' maps. Many of them have these little safety valves which you really don't feel like engaging with what a particular map is doing. It's hard to say if a lot of these are intentional, but here's some. Yet again, I come to the wind map. You don't have to play like 90% of this map, just immediately use the wind to push all your units to the boss and win. The duel with Ryoma? Instead of fighting through the whole map to open the doors to him, really piss him off by luring him to the bottom of the map and hitting him over the wall.
Let's go.
It's over.
The map with the Kitsune who alternate being invulnerable each turn? Just fly up to the mountains where they can't hit you. Sure, it will take over 200 turns and over 3 real-time hours, but you sure showed them. Sakura's map that has your army split into 2 halves, with each side using dragon veins to open new paths for the other. Well, just pair up all your units at the start and fight through one side at double the strength. And I don't even need to mention the final map again. If you do play through Chapter 21 though, you'll find it's a very fun experience, not just because of the map itself. It's at this chapter that the Tier 3 weapon and staff shop become available, giving access to some of the most powerful tools like brave weapons. What's more, your units are likely starting to get access to some powerful skills, and as luck would have it, green idiots who run at you make for perfect test dummies. Now as for the map itself, it features a soft time limit. You're encouraged to keep pushing forward, as every turn, more green guys keep flowing in from the top and bottom of the map. Of particular note, these reinforcements don't give you any experience, and I think this was an effective, if not blunt, solution to disincentivize infinite grinding. Although the green guys make up the majority of the enemy force, they're given a variety of breaker skills to diversify them. These make it so certain weapons are much less likely to hit them, encouraging either changing a unit's weapon or using a different unit entirely to combat them. On top of this, the green guys also have poison skills which automatically drain your unit's HP, constantly wearing away at your army if they survive combat. The key word there being, if they survive. Because if you kill a greenie in one round, the poison does not trigger. This pushes the offensive capabilities of your army, but given that you just got shiny new weapons to play around with, it's not too difficult. Now the green guys are far from the biggest danger on the map, as I've yet to even mention the only other enemy type present.
If you smell what the rock is cooking.
The rock guys. While you just got new highly advanced weaponry, they've chosen to go with the classic strategy of just throwing rocks at you. And honestly, it's pretty damn effective. The rock guys are even harder to kill than the green guys because they're made of rock, meaning that they have high defense and a skill that prevents them from being doubled, making them extremely difficult to kill without magic or insanely high attack. To make matters worse, attacking one of them likely puts you in the range of another one, but luckily, that's where the dragon vein of this map comes in.
The sage says, Jin, I'm gonna take that little katana and shove it so far up your candy ass that you're gonna wish that I didn't do that.
When activated, it freezes all enemies on the map, preventing them from moving. The applications of this are immediately apparent, and they're just scarcely distributed enough to make activating one feel like a much needed reprieve. I also love that last little tease at the end of the map with the boss green guy. He's more dangerous than the regular greenies, but he has good loot on him, tempting you to stay and challenge him. All in all, it's a pretty tight map that puts you on the offensive. Not the most difficult, but definitely fun, and it achieves this through the use of only 2 enemy types. Look, I didn't even know I wanted a zombie apocalypse map, but it turns out it's about as fun as I would imagine bashing a real zombie's brains in would be. Okay, now look, if I've at all made these levels sound flawless, no. The truth is far from it. Each and every one of them shares the same fatal flaw. I don't even know what to call them, but each level has these sections where you have to press the A button as fast as you can before you're in control of Corrin again.
Alright, this part sucks. Here we go. Okay. Alright, come on. Hold on. Come on, baby. Come on. Come on.
It's honestly really tiring, but I think what they were going for was a feeling of accomplishments once you finally beat it. Alright, fine. The plot of Fates. I want to specify the plot and not the story because I think the story is something different. The story is your experience, what characters you favored, their trials and tribulations, as well as the other elements that contribute to the narrative and the world. Which is why I have no problem saying that Three Houses has the best story when you take all those things into consideration.
Open the door, you little whore. Come fish with me, we'll sail across the sea.
But yes, if you actually bother to read the text in those button mashing sections, you'll find them quite troubling. Look, there's no question the plot of Fates is bad. Very bad. But I don't think that really matters. Certainly, it might matter a lot more if Fates had nothing else going for it, but that's not even close to the case. And I don't think crafting a captivating plot has ever been the series' strong suit. Generally speaking, they're predictable, straightforward, dealing with typical themes of good versus evil. Oh my god! Which is totally fine if people enjoy that, but if you're someone who is truly enthralled by the plots of these games, well, I have some children's books I could recommend. The narrative element that resonates much stronger with me is the characters, how they fight, their personalities, their interactions with each other. Things you don't see just following the plot. It is so easy to get attached to a character that has virtually no bearing on the plot, and I think that's a huge contribution to Three Houses' popularity, given how it expanded upon its characters. To me, it feels like a lot of the time, the plot is just there out of obligation. Like, do any of these games need 27 chapters to tell their story? No, but there needs to be a game after all. And Fates might be the most game of all, with the least regard for the plot. Does it make sense that they genocided the Kitsune? No, but it makes for a cool level. Does Azura's plan to save Hoshido by destroying Hoshido make any sense? No, but you chose Nor, and those Hoshidans are better off dead anyway. Now I can see why people place such importance on the plot. It's the thing everyone playing will experience, and it's also the thing that appeals most to the greatest number of people, the casual players. I don't mean that in a derogatory, filthy casual sort of way. I mean that most people who play these games probably aren't getting intimately deep with the mechanics, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it's these very same people who dismiss Fates as, ew, the one with the bad story and it. That time, I was trying to be derogatory. And this is perhaps the most frustrating part of this whole ordeal. I could preach to you all day about how every single aspect of Fates is impeccable, and hopefully I brought to light some of those aspects. But someone who cares most about the plot of these games will, rightfully so, say that Fates is the worst one. But then I guess I just described what it is to have an opinion. There's no accounting for taste. All this to say, I vehemently refuse to talk about the plot in detail. I refuse to perpetuate the hate-filled circle jerk. Fates is so much more.
Oh, please.
Brothers and sisters, Norians, and those unlucky enough to call themselves Hoshidan, a new age is upon us, an age of enlightenment, one in which we see with eyes unclouded by hate, in which the true beauty of a game shines through, unmarred by incestuous relations, unmarred by nonsensical plots, in which we can look to the future to support those who to this day continue to support us. If they even exist or not, I don't know. Because maybe they believe what I know to be true. Fire Emblem Fates is worth it.
Well done, my boy. Well done indeed. You've passed your first trial with flying colors, but many others await you before we let your dumb ass back on Olympus.
Yes, Daddy. I'll do whatever it takes. I'll make you proud of me, Daddy.